Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. All right, man. So as you guys do know, we have the Grand Prix, the FIDE Grand Prix going on right now. It just started today. Yes, they are finishing up the first round right now, and I do have Wesley versus Leinier Domínguez Pérez. And yes, it has been a minute since I've done a video. Been a little bit busy with it, but I am back now. So I will be covering the FIDE Grand Prix for you guys. And of course, for all my people in the Philippines, I will say mabuhay. Maligayang pagdating sa mga chess, ladies and gentlemen. Maraming salamat po sa nanonood ng aking mga video. Magandang umaga. It is, let me see, 12 o'clock. So it's like super in the middle of the morning. It's like 2 a.m. So magandang umaga to you. Almasal tayo. I appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. Anybody who is coming from Cuba or who does speak Spanish, I will say, bienvenidos al ajedrez, damas y caballeros. Muchas gracias para ver mi video. I appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. I'm taking a look at my stuff. Yes, so we're good to go. So anybody else, appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. But if you guys are ready to go, let's take a look and see what we have for this game. All right, so we got D4, we got D5, C4. So this is all like Queen's Gambit area. I mean, you know, you definitely have some like E6s and some, you know, Knight F6s and stuff that can come. You know, however you want to play. I mean, there's some Slav type stuff too. But we do see pawn takes C4. And so this is the Queen's Gambit accepted. And it's not actually a gambit because it is very, very possible for you to get this pawn back either immediately or a little bit later down the line. It does kind of stretch you thin if you're black and you're trying to hold on to this pawn for dear life because you can mess yourself up. We do have E4, and so, you know, this gives white a really, really nice pawn center. And like I said, black is trying to desperately hold on to this pawn because, I mean, if they can manage it, then they just have an extra pawn. So we do see B5. And something that we have to make sure that we do not allow as white is C6, A6, and bishop to B7. Because then you basically have just won a pawn as black. So we have to make sure that we attack. So, super early in the game, I know. But if you do want to pause the video, because Wesley you know, being one of the best in the world, he does attack this correctly. So, you know, it starts off with a specific move. So if you guys want to go ahead and pause the video and guess this specific move, go ahead and do so. Okay, cool. So the move is actually A4. Like I said, you cannot let A6, C6, and bishop to B7 happen. The main issue that black has in their position is that they're underdeveloped and they've just moved pawns on the wing and this rook is actually undefended. So it is actually not possible at this moment to hold the pawn. So after we see A6 or A4, we do see C6, pawn takes B5, pawn takes B5, and you guys can see that this pawn is not the greatest defendable because, you know, after you play something like A6, you cannot capture it back, you know, because this rook is going to be hanging. So after we see the move knight to C3, you know, still desperately trying to hold on to the pawn, we see Pérez go queen to B6. And then we do see B3. You know, A4 and B3 are very thematic. You know, that is the way that you're going to break down this structure. And you don't want to go something like B4 because knight is going to be coming to D5. And you have just gotten a very, very juicy tempo on the queen. So we actually see E6, which is correct. You know, black is trying to counterattack. You know, we do see, you know, bishop coming to B4. After we do see pawn taking C4, we see bishop to B4. And I mean, yes, the knight is undefended because we have moved all of our pawns in front on the queen side. So bishop does come to D2. Pawn takes C4, knight comes to F3. We see knight to E7, bishop takes C4, and now you see we have finally gotten the pawn back. And any further attempts to try to hold on to the pawn just pretty much end in disaster. So we do have castles for black, castles for white, and I mean, as you guys can see, you know, white is severely ahead of black as far as development goes. You know, they have all of these pieces still stuck on their back rank, and white has basically, you know, gotten all of their pieces out, and the material count is the same. We do have a5, pretty much only move because you have to try to, you know, hold this bishop, and you do kind of have a pass pawn, so I mean, why not push it, right? And then we do see the novelty of the game, which is d5. Before, we have actually seen knight to a4. That game was quite a few years ago. And that's definitely also another move that you can play. Something else is actually rook to e1 as well. And then after knight to d7, you still see knight coming to a4, knocking the queen somewhere. And you don't want to just kind of, you know, tuck it behind because you are looking at this really huge pawn push. So you're trying to prevent that. So backing up, like I said, we did see d5. And this does actually allow black to start kind of trying to unravel their pieces and get some counterattack rolling. So we actually see bishop to a6 and taking advantage of the fact that this bishop is currently undefended. And also you can't really move it because this rook is going to be hanging the exchange behind it. So you're going to throw in the tempo gainer knight to a4. Queen comes back to d8. Bishop takes a6. Rook takes a6. You also had the ability of taking knight to a6 here as well, but it wasn't as good by far. It basically allowed you, if we were to go into that, to take care with the bishop, and then no matter what you do, you are going to be pushing d6 and then following up with e5, and so you're going to have a really, really nice pass pawn in the center of the board. So we didn't want to do that. So like I said, we did see rook taking a6. Pawn taking e6, and then rook taking e6, throwing an attack on this undefended pawn here. Bishop took b4, bishop took b4, or pawn took b4, queen taking d8, rook taking d8, and then we do see knight to c5. Simultaneously attacking this rook, and then also protecting our pawn here on e4. Rook coming to c6, just attacking this undefended piece. So as you can see, black is doing a very good job of making sure that they counterattack white's undefended pieces, and that's, you know, gaining tempi throughout the game. So we actually see rook f to c1. We got rook d to c8, and the pressure is actually mounting quite a bit for black. So we do see knight down to b3. Rook takes c1 with check. Rook takes c1, rook takes c1, and then knight takes c1. And then we're trying to see if we can kind of do something. You know, black actually definitely has a strength with this pawn here. So it's just a matter of trying to see if we can force that down to be a queen. We definitely, you know, don't want to allow the pushing of it, because once the pawn would hit a b2, it will be attacking this this knight, kind of make it a dumb knight. So we do have f5. Pawn takes f5, knight takes f5, and then we see the king start to get into the game. We see king to f1, knight comes down to c6, king comes to e2, king comes to f7, king comes to d3, knight comes back to d6. We see knight to e2, king comes down to f6. We see knight e to d4, knight takes d4, knight takes d4. And then we actually, in this position, see a repetition. We see knight down to f5, knight to f3. Knight comes up to d6, and then knight to d4. So we have repeated the position the second time. We see knight down to f5, knight down to f3, knight back to d6, and knight to d4. And we actually do have a draw by 3-4 repetition in this position here. But for some reason, we actually see king down to e5. And this is the point that the game stops. So you would think that you have a 3-fold repetition. I'm not sure if the arbiter came and stopped the game after king to e5, or if one of them claimed. We don't have the actual video of the tournament. They're just kind of covering it pretty much as if it were an online tournament. And I think it's really interesting in this position here because in this particular position, Wesley So actually has a really nice move, and it is knight to c6 with check. And then after the king pretty much moves anywhere, you know, let's say f6 or something, the knight would be taking on b4. And this is actually pretty nice for white, just because you have this extra pawn. So you actually have some, you know, some play in this position. So I'm not sure why the game ended in this particular position. Yeah, this is where it ended. So like I said, I'm not sure why. I was looking online to try to find the video of the players actually playing, so I can kind of see like if somebody raised their hand or what the situation was, but I wasn't able to see any. So yes, that is that game. You kind of could tell, like, when you got to, let me see, what point was it? When you started to get to this position here, that the rooks were probably going to be traded. So after the knight came to b3, you could pretty much imagine that it's going to be going towards a draw after all these pieces come down, and you're just trading off pieces. There's not going to really be a good way, to force this pawn down. It's pretty stuck. I mean, especially with this knight, kind of blocking it on b3. So that is that game. I appreciate you guys very much for coming by. Maraming salamat, aking mga kaibigan. Muchas gracias, mis amigos. And I will see you guys next time.